We told the story in 4 parts. We thought that the very first thing to do, really, when we wanted to make this river into main characters, was to get to know the first people of this river. That's the Nez Perce tribe. We decided that what we really needed to do was go to Nez Perce country, the oldest village site, the oldest site of human habitation in North America, is a Nez Perce site. And it's right by the Salmon River. It's big, 16,500 years old. It's nothing over that we know of so far in North America. And so we thought, all right, let's go talk to the first people of this place, the first people on this river, and learn their sense of the river. How do they understand it? How do they know it? This is actually a very special feature, and you can go see it. It's a national park monument site. It's called the Heart of the Loster. You see this mound in the background. It comes from the Nez Perce creation story. And in it, a Loster was capturing all of the animals that they depend on for their lifeway and devouring them, and the people were at risk. And so Coyote, ever the trickster, is the one who's figured out to jump into the mouth of the monster and chew his way out through the monster's body, so that the rest of the animals could escape. And it was the blood coming out of that event from the monster dripping onto the ground from which the Nez Perce people come. We went to go spend time with the Nez Perce family. And for us, when we're doing our reporting, the gold standard is intimacy. We really want to be up close and personal with people that we're covering. And so to be able to spend time with a family, see the food that they put up from their sacred river, walk their landscape, see down those tracks that mean so much to them, to be able to go into their home. The Open family let us come and visit them in Canada. We usually ask this simple question: if we weren't here, what would you normally be doing? And the answer we got back was, oh, well, we'd be driving along the ridge looking for deer and for elk. So we got in the truck and looking for deer and elk to shoot, to kill. And I'm thinking in the backseat, oh, please don't find it. They did find some, but they were pregnant and resting. And so, of course, they let them be. But for us to be in the cab and watch the interaction between the son and the father and realize how well Jader saw animals, he saw things none of the rest of us thought. To see their understanding of their home place, the rhythm of their day. That's what we were there for. That's what we wanted. And then to get into the house as they were having dinner and realize that for them, mac and cheese comes with ground elves. Just take a picture of Celilo Falls on the wall. What's the greatest fishery in the world for Native people? Drowned by the Dallas Dam in the 1950s. But that's the grandfather of the family pointing to Celilo Falls. It's framed, it's on the wall because it means that much to them. We learned so much from this family. We enjoyed and were so honored to be included in their night. Even the sweat lodge that they had after dinner. You see the fire, the smoke, the flames, the sparks, sticker their animals. To be with them, walking naked, steeping out into the night. We didn't put that picture in the paper. To be included like that in a family, in their routine, to understand their place from their heart, that for us is what we're going for. There's nothing better. How did we do that? Well, you heard I worked at the paper for 27 years. I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of them for a very long time. And so when I knew we wanted to go to Nez Perce country, I called the chairman. I said, Mr. Chairman, we're coming. What do you think? Who should we see? What should we do? And I got a list. I got a list of names and people, and we started making our calls, talking to people, feeling out the possibilities. This is how we do our work. We do it through word of mouth. We do it through connections. We do it through relationships. All the best reporting is about relationships, especially in Indian country. There's no Freedom of Information Act. There's no Public Records Act. There's no Open Meetings Act. You have no right to be there if they don't want you there. So it's all about establishing credibility and keeping it by earning it. We went to go visit Nakia Williamson at his home. These are his Appaloosa horses. You may know the Nez Perce tribe specially bred these horses for their courage in the Nez Perce War. They're still bred today. Nakia took us someplace I didn't know we were going to go. This is another thing that happens in reporting. You think you know what's going to happen. You've prepared. You have an idea where you're going to go and why.
But then if you're very lucky, and if you've prepared very well, things happen far better than you ever could have even known to ask for, like this moment. That's Nakia standing before the headstones of mass graves of his ancestors who were moved out of the way of construction of the Lower Snake River dams. In 1973, 1974, nearly 300 ancestors had to be moved in fragments and reburied here. I didn't know that was going to happen, but to me, this moment that he would share it, that he would let us photograph it, I was deeply honored and I was deeply grateful, because I wanted all of us to understand what did it mean to the first people to see the changes that came with us, changes at this scale. Erika Schultz, the photographer that I was with in this moment, turned and she said to me as we were leaving, Lynda, they look like dams. And they do, don't they? So this place is another important place in the Nez Perce creation story. This is where the animals got their names. This hillside over the Clearwater River, we felt this was important because we wanted to bring forward this understanding of the natural world that the tribe lives with, that nature isn't just scenery, it isn't just something out there someplace, and that animals aren't just commodities. In fact, they are kin. And this is where the animals got their names in their cosmology. And so we wanted people to understand that this hillside that you've probably driven by many times, a highway goes right by it, it's across the street from their casino, it has a whole other meaning. The idea here is to understand that there are meanings that you don't know behind landscapes that you've seen many times. That includes the Columbia River. Shannon Wheeler's pictured there by the flags. We went to visit him when he was meeting with tribal fishers. That was a very tense and sad day for him. He was basically telling them that there was going to be very little fish for them to catch. The tribe has been pushing for many years now to have the 4 Lower Snake River dams taken down, taken out, removed, to try to rebuild the fisheries in the Columbia Snake Rivers. That's one of the Lower Snake River dams pictured there. Notice the red, white, and blue lights. We visited the reservation and we saw the community salmon locker. You see it's nearly empty. Salmon are sacred food for the Nez Perce people. Whenever there's a naming, a funeral, a birthday, a special occasion, salmon must be on the table. There are fishers in the community whose job it is to make sure that locker is never empty. And as you can see, they're almost out. There was a lot of anguish about that, a lot of concern. There'd been a lot of funerals on the reservation that winter. And this anxiety of, will there be enough? That is new, and it is not supposed to be. We decided that the second chapter, after setting the table for you, introducing you to the first people and some of these primal relationships of this place, we wanted to introduce the river as the river and take it all the way back to the beginning of the river's beginnings. They're ancient. The river is much older than the rocks. This is the Hanford Reach. It's the last undammed stretch of the river, about 50 miles, right there at the White Bluffs. Spectacularly beautiful. These rocks tell the story. These modest, round rocks. Those are river rocks, aren't they? But as you see, they're nowhere near a river. These are outside of Granger, Washington, and that's because the river itself has moved from its path during this cataclysmic, long career of ice age floods. Volcanic seeping lava over millions of years, pushing the river, shoving the river, putting it in new places. These basaltic rock forms that you see when you drive around eastern Washington are the legacy of that time as the lava cooled and shaped itself into these beautiful polygons. These fantastic waterfalls you see, like this one, Dry Falls, another memory, Police Falls, pardon me, another memory of the time of the cataclysmic ice age floods. We wanted people to understand the timelessness of this river and that it had already been through so much, and then this happened. This is the third chapter, our chapter. This is the alteration made by us, beginning in 1930 with Grand Coulee, still today the largest hydropower dam anywhere in the country, built, of course, during the Depression to bring this part of the country out of the Depression, create jobs, bring electricity to the rural areas, and create something entirely new, power for the people. This was meant to be pushback against the investor-owned utilities of the Northeast. This was progressivism. This was Woody Guthrie. This was the promise of power sold so cheaply you wouldn't be able to meter it, was the promise. And so you might notice the incredible change between this and this and this moment here. That was on purpose. When we put this together, we wanted you to feel the shock of the mechanization that we brought to this river. Over 40 years, 150 dams, each and every one creating slack water. Today, the Columbia is a completely re-engineered river. It is, as it's been called by the great historian Richard White, an organic machine. Hundreds and hundreds and thousands of miles of slack water going through hydropower dams that create power that goes to states all over the region in an interconnected public power grid. Also irrigation. Grand Coulee was actually created for irrigation, to be able to create the power that could pump water all over the Columbia Basin Irrigation Project, still functioning today, bringing water to farms. All of this progress came at a cost. These fish were photographed by Erika underwater. She'll talk a little more about that at a hatchery up by the Toucannon River. This is about as good as it's ever going to be to them in their cozy little hatchery, because once they go out to the Toucannon River, they're at grave risk of extinction. Now to us, when Michael Hurt told us this, we were surprised. This biologist from the WDFW told us that these Toucannon River Chinook are the most at risk in the Columbia Basin. They are just about extinct. And the problem for these Chinook is that they come out between two dams, two of the lower Snake River dams. When you look at this slide, that's the Toucannon River there to the right. Notice the darker color. That's the original river channel. That's where it used to be. And it's now completely engulfed, flooded by the slack water behind the lower Snake River dams. And so what's been created here is a feast, a perfect warm water feast for walleye. Walleye are an invasive fish. They are a table fish that people love to catch. They apparently are delicious, and they eat baby salmon. They were introduced as a game fish to the Columbia River, and they're thriving in these warm, still waters. Today, the most numerous fish in the Columbia River are not salmon. They're not steelhead. They are pond fish, shad, bass, carp, walleye. It's not easy for the people either. We went to go see Don Schwerin, who has a farm where he grows wheat and garbanzos in the Snake River country. People like Don Schwerin treasure their land, and they treasure their farming tradition. What he wants is certitude, and he is past tired of the debate and the court cases that have been going on for decades now over whether to take out the lower Snake River dams. He asked me while we were together, why wouldn't you want to recreate the services of these dams? The railroad lines, the transportation, the electricity. Why wouldn't you do that so that we still have those services, and then if Congress ever decided to take out those dams, I could still farm and we could all have a secure future. But instead, things are going backwards. All of the agreements that were made with years of work under the Biden administration have been overturned by the Trump administration, and it's very likely that litigation that had been stayed is going to be coming back to court. And uncertainty will continue to be the situation for people like Don Schwerin. Again, intimacy was our goal here, to be at his farm, to see his home, to see how the man walked, to hear his voice, to see his work gloves. We felt so honored to be with him and that he would open his farm to us so that we could share his story with all of you. We didn't want this story to be only about problems and worries and troubles. We also wanted to talk about solutions. And so we went back to the Nez Perce tribe, where they're taking a bold, bold, bold step, an initiative to try to solarize their reservation. They're doing that because they want to take pressure off the river. They want to be able to retire the electricity from the lower Snake River dams and power right back up with power from the sun, partnering with other tribes around the West with even better solar resources to eventually have enough solar power on the grid to replace the lower Snake River dams. And they're not dawdling about this. As you can see, they've got solar collectors on the gymnasium, on the school, they're even at the wastewater treatment plant. And why are they doing this? They're doing it for their people, for their community. This is a close-knit community that is place-based. They don't ever want to leave there. And they were promised, when they made room for us, that they could fish forever in the place they always have. That was in the Treaty of 1855, and it's as true today as it was then. We had a very special opportunity as we were just wrapping the reporting up for this story to go fishing with one of these families. The Nez Perce, before our arrival, were among the wealthiest tribes anywhere in North America. Their hunting and fishing grounds went all the way from buffalo country down to the Pacific along the Columbia River. And so their treaty rights today go all the way down to Bonneville Dam. We went out with the Oatman family, who invited us to go for a very short subsistence fishery on the river. As you can see, it was a perfect day. And to see these fishing platforms that are still used in addition to modern gear, you don't know that these fishing platforms are there when you're driving along the highway because they're below the surface of the road along the river. And there must be more than 100 of them. And to see those and realize how important this practice is today, as it has always been, it hits you different when you're with people who are doing that fishing. When you see them with their little kids and you understand this isn't only about food, it's a family ritual. It's the time to be together. It's the time to laugh and to smile. Of course, to get the beautiful fish, to be on the river itself, to be with your grandmother. We felt so honored to be there and to share this with them. And so I want you to know that when we make these stories, we do it slowly, we do it carefully, we do it together. We do it with a lot of help from our editors. More than anything, we do it with the help of people like you, sources who work with us, ask us questions, check our facts, cheer us on, challenge us. But more than anything, we do it as a team. And so now I'm going to call up the very first member of our team to come talk about her work and how she does what she does. Fiona Martin, scientific illustrator extraordinaire. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Fiona Martin. I'm a science illustrator and graphic artist at the Seattle Times. A little bit about me. I'm hard of hearing since birth, and I rely on a combination of technology, visual cues, including speech reading. I feel fortunate to have found a career path that plays to my strengths in visual communication. Before I became a journalist, I was a full-time science illustrator. The fields of science and art are both rooted in observation and meaning-making. From the first cave painting to Leonardo da Vinci, scientific drawings have served as a way not only to learn about a subject, but to communicate in a universal, accessible language. Science illustration goes by many names, including communication design, data visualization, and visual storytelling. Science illustration goes beyond photography to communicate concepts at a glance, showing cutaways, taking things apart, and otherwise satisfying our curiosity for all things hidden, complex, or abstract. Through good design and visual storytelling, we make science accessible and transparent. Using visual metaphors helps make abstract concepts more relatable and manageable. We begin to make sense of large data sets or weather patterns, allowing for comparison and more informed decision-making. Stylized illustration or fine art combat information overload by adding a sense of atmosphere and continuity. Illustrations can also appeal to emotions and empathy or add a dose of humor, which goes a long way when talking about technical subjects. Here's a few illustrations I've created for the Times. On the left, a conceptual illustration of conifer photosynthesis, including cross-sections and cutaways. On the top right, a diagram of how heat pumps work. And in the middle, a drawing of how the drug naloxone works to reverse an opioid overdose. On the bottom middle, a cartoon by my colleague, Gabby Campagnaro. And on the lower right, a chart of energy costs, with peaks coinciding with major storms, heat waves, and other disruptions. In Lynda's story about the Columbia River Basin, I focused mainly on the geology section, helping to set up the background on what the river used to be like compared to how it is today. The published series includes 17 illustrations, 7 maps, and 1 chart. 25 graphics altogether. All went through extensive copy editing. Alternates were created for print, online, and mobile. A few didn't make the cut. I marked those with an X. Originally, we planned to include a toast to the Ice Age floods that brought the fine, silty soil that supports 90% of Washington's vineyards. But alcohol can be a sensitive subject, and we wanted this presentation to be a resource for all, including teachers and students. My process starts with lots of research. I like to become an expert on whatever it is I'm drawing, and interviews with the source. We had a wonderful interview with Nick Zentner, geology professor and YouTube personality from Central Washington University. Nick is the kind of teacher that we all wish we could have, and a great storyteller. For one, he loves using food metaphors, and that made learning about geology a little more fun. At a gas station outside of Granger, which is between Yakima and the Tri-Cities, he shared a range of resources, such as former and current paths of the Columbia River, the origin of quartzite in northeastern Washington, shown in turquoise at the top, a cutaway poster designed by Cynthia Shaw, and a map showing the extent of lava floods that once filled the basin where we stood. Then he took us on a field trip to a roadside cut near Granger. Nick showed us how to read the rocks. These 10-million-year-old blonde quartzite river cobbles, polished smooth and stacked several stories high, show that the powerful ancient Columbia River once flowed here. The cobbles themselves are like a work of art. Once you know what to look for, you can read the history of Washington. I sought to convey this concept through my storytelling. While Nick talked about geology with Lynda, Erika, and Lauren, I was busy sketching, gathering as many visual notes as I could. You never know what you might need later in the studio. While sketching, I observe on a deeper level. I notice more than I would passing by because I'm forced to capture the basic shapes, proportions, light, and shadow. My motto is to draw what you see, not what you think you see. But in this case, I also designed and stylized quite a bit. The real scene was incredibly detailed and large, and I needed to distill the sketch down to the most important elements.
Okay.
I take notes on colors, textures, proportions, and patterns. Accuracy is less of a concern. Field sketching is more about capturing the moment. I also think about how I might lay out the final art. In the storyboarding stage, I think about how I want to organize the story. What are the most important points? How will the reader navigate through? How will I create a cohesive design? I ended up using the sketch you saw in several panels, which helped save time. I also decided this story needed to be a scrolling presentation so the reader could focus on one panel or concept at a time. Next, I create more detailed sketches. Now I'm paying attention to proportions and accuracy. Here, an invasive walleye is feasting on baby salmon. This illustration helps to tell the story about the cost of the dams. Walleye are an invasive species with a voracious appetite, and they love the warm slack water behind the dams. It would have been difficult to photograph a walleye eating salmon, so I saw a good opportunity here to do an illustration and maybe have a little bit of fun with it too. For the color rendering, I used Procreate on the iPad with an Apple Pencil. The digital painting allows me to make edits as needed. Although digital, I lean on my background in acrylics and oil painting. I use a screen protector that has a paper texture. I only use a few brushes, starting with midtones first and then adding shadows, highlights, and textures. My favorite part of the job is seeing sketches come to life. Next, I arrange the panels in a scrolling format. This way, readers can see one panel at a time and follow along at their own pace. I include a QR code on the screen if you'd like to access the scroller on your phone. Titled Born of Fire and Ice, the full scroller has 17 panels. It starts with the original coastline of Washington. 750 million years ago, the west coast was located near Spokane and Pullman. Geologists know this because northeast Washington has ancient beaches, sand that was compressed into quartzite rock, entire mountains of the stuff. Over the last 200 million years, most of our state was built by tectonics. The ancient North American continent moved west, colliding with volcanic islands along the way. 6 to 17 million years ago, lava floods filled the Columbia Basin. The lava seeped from long fissures in the Earth's crust, filling the basin like thin layers of a chocolate cake. 1 to 10 million years ago, the ancient Columbia River was much more powerful than it is today, in some places a mile wide and 500 feet deep. As recent as 12,000 to 18,000 years ago, when mammoths were living here, not dinosaurs, Washington experienced a series of ice age floods. Huge glacial lakes would periodically break from their ice dams and send a torrent across the state. The icy waters backed up behind Wallula Gap and filled the Pasco Basin, resembling a chocolate milkshake with icebergs. Fast forward to the present. Nick tells us how we can read the rocks. These 10 million year old quartzite cobbles, resembling blonde potatoes, show the path of the ancient Columbia River, which is now 15 miles away. The quartzite cobbles can be identified by their blonde exterior and sparkling white interior. Nick says we can also see evidence of the Ice Age flood in these stacked rhythmites on top of the cobbles, layers of fine silt and sand. Lighter bands are wind-blown flood deposits called loess, which are ideal for growing Washington vineyards and fruit orchards. Across from the Hanford nuclear site, we observed dozens of these flood rhythmites deposited in a channel within the White Bluffs. The bluffs are part of a much older 3 to 8 million year old Ringgold Formation, which is rich in prehistoric fossils. Evidence of the Ice Age floods can be seen everywhere if you know where to look, such as these ice-rafted boulders, unlike the surrounding terrain, and giant current ripples 20 to 40 feet high and 300 feet apart. We're all familiar with columnar basalt, is such a tongue twister, in the Columbia Gorge. What you might not know is that these were formed by the lava floods, which cracked and cooled into these columns. As the floodwaters squeezed through Wallula Gap, they left behind these basalt pinnacles called the Twin Sisters. Today, many dams, including Grand Coulee, are built in the natural canyons created first by the lava flood and then carved out by the Ice Age floods. The river today is a very different place than it used to be. We also published a range of maps and a graph, and this map shows the modern Columbia with 31 dams in the federal Columbia River power system and many more dams throughout the basin. The river is the largest source of hydropower in the country. Today, more than 40% of the basin is blocked to fish by impassable dams. Other maps included the lava floods, the Ice Age floods, and locations mentioned in the story, such as the small town of Granger, the Nez Perce Reservation, Tucannon Fish Hatchery, and we also included a graph of low Chinook numbers returning to the Tucannon River. Finally, I drafted a mock print layout and then sent that over to Frank Mina and Karen Steichen to finalize the print layout. Part of the geology scholar was also featured in the main story. I want to end with a quick thank you to all of the people who made this project possible. As Lynda said, it takes a team. Special thanks to Nick Zentner, whose geology expertise and knack for storytelling was inspiring. Thank you, Lynda Mapes, who is possibly the greatest writer I have ever worked with. Erika and Lauren have taught me many things about what it means to be a visual journalist in the field. You both inspire me and push me to be better, exactly the kind of people I want to work with. With that, I'll hand the mic over to Lauren, who will share her video storytelling. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Frohne, video journalist for the Seattle Times. I film and edit short documentaries and video stories and work on immersive digital projects, adding motion to our storytelling, like in this project. And so I'll talk a little bit about our approach for video storytelling for this. But first, I also want to start by talking about Lynda, and by saying that working with Lynda on stories and projects like this over the past 10 years that I've worked at the Seattle Times has been a highlight of my career. We started calling, as she mentioned, these kind of trips swashbuckling. It's usually a group of 3 or 4 of us women just pack all of our various boots and rain gear, our puffy jackets, and all of our camera gear and head out on an adventure, knowing it'll most likely involve boats, mountains, forests, divey hotels, and long days in the wilderness. And something you as readers may not know is that not only is Lynda a remarkable reporter and writer, she also provides the best backseat snacks and caterings that a colleague can ask for. Like, we're talking sourdough pancakes and avocado sandwiches served on plates with cloth napkins. Lynda treats us as her colleagues as thoughtfully as she treats her stories and the people in them. And I've learned so much from her about all aspects of the job. So for this project, we wanted to use video in a very specific way and not duplicate our storytelling. And we also knew that this wasn't the place to make a comprehensive film about the Columbia River spanning its full history. So when the opportunity to film with Nick Zentner, as Fiona talked about, presented itself, we thought we couldn't pass up that opportunity. Nick is a geology professor at Central Washington University, and he can tell captivating stories even about rocks. He has a wildly popular YouTube channel in which he takes viewers along on his geological adventures. And this seemed like a great way that we could connect readers with the ancient history of the Columbia in an unexpected way. And so after some back and forth and frigid temperatures in Central Washington in early spring, we met up with Nick in Granger, Washington. And still, I'm going to show you the piece. It's a short video story. But still, the question remained, like, how do I make a video story about rocks on the side of the road interesting and visual? And how do we make a story about the river when we're nowhere near the river? So I will play this short piece and then I'll talk a little bit more about it.
It's the only river that goes right through a major mountain range here in the Pacific Northwest. Why is that? The answer is the Columbia River is older than the Cascade Range. The Columbia River we know today is just the most recent version of a river that has much more history than anything else. This is a place called Snipes Mountain. We're south of a little town of Granger. If we go straight east, the Columbia River is, as the crow flies, 15 miles away. All right, not much of a shoulder here. You guys are city slickers. You know how to handle this. I tell stories for a living, basically, and they're geology stories. I love the stories that these rocks tell. Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. I've been up here a few times, but not with this light. Holy cow. Yeah, this is a top 10 spot, I think, in Washington for geology. Everybody perfectly polished. Everybody perfectly tumbled. If you see these in a place that doesn't have a river, you know that a river used to be there. The stunning thing to me is how many of these things are quartzite. Quartzite is a really dense, metamorphic rock where a bunch of beautiful grains of sand, quartz grains of sand, were just crushed. This is a rare rock for Washington, and there's, 500 vertical feet of thousands and thousands of these beautiful blonde quartzites that are snow white on the inside. They shouldn't be here. The Columbia River brought these things here 10 million years ago. 1 billion with a B, 1 billion years ago. There was a beach, a coastline at Spokane, Washington, and up through northeastern Washington. It was a beach just like we know today. It's a bunch of sand, quartz sand. And there was deep, deep ocean where we now have most of the state of Washington. That sand eventually got buried, compressed into quartzite, and then lifted back up to the surface so that the mountains of northeastern Washington, many of the mountains are literally nothing but blonde quartzite. That's home for these quartzite cobbles. And it was the Columbia and the Columbia only that was picking up quartzite from northeastern Washington, moving it across the state of Washington and dropping it here. You need a fast-moving, powerful river to move stones like this halfway across the state. And the Columbia River was a very powerful, energetic river for most of its history until recently. And it was just a small window of time that the Columbia was flowing here at Granger, Washington, and these rocks prove that. The geologist says everything's in motion. The continent's in motion, literally. The ridges are rising, the valleys are deepening, the rivers are shifting. Nothing's permanent, including us.
Whenever I'm considering pursuing a video project or story, I'm always thinking about character first and foremost. The goal is always to connect readers more deeply with the people featured in our reporting. And with video storytelling, we can hear them, see them, and spend time with them. And as you saw, Nick is a compelling character. He's so passionate about these types of stories that rocks can tell, and it's infectious. His enthusiasm comes through in how he delights in the rocks, how he handles them. So including super tight details of his hands and using his rock hammer helps to show this. And the audio of his genuine reaction as he examines the hillside provides additional sense of storytelling and sense of place, kind of sets you in the scene. And then of course, having him recount the story there on the spot helps build the narrative. And to better visualize some aspects of the story Nick tells, I partnered with Fiona to incorporate and animate some of her maps and graphics. And this can help explain some of those aspects that you can't see to photograph or film. I also filmed many scenics from the river and the Grand Coulee Dam, the Hanford Reach area, and places along the way to show what the river looks like now. It kind of helps you visualize what it might have been like so long ago. I used my drone camera to capture the scale and sense of place. And in general, this whole project is profoundly visual. For example, because we had this video story and Fiona's illustrations to tell the story of the ancient Columbia, Lynda didn't actually write many words for this section. It was told visually. And the character of Nick is really only shown through experiencing the video. So that's how we try to integrate all of these various elements to tell a complete story rather than one that's repetitive, told in the same way 3 different times. And this video, while a small piece of the overall project, it tells an interesting, discrete story about the Columbia River and its history without even visiting the river itself. So now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Erika Schultz, staff photographer who works with our Climate Lab team.
It was such an incredible opportunity to be able to work on this project and also to work with my colleagues on this project. You know, Lynda and Fiona and Lauren are so good at their craft. They inspire me to be better, and I really appreciate the collaboration through the process. It's made it really special. And, you know, one thing that Lynda always says that is so true is that journalism is a team sport. You know, and it truly is. When we go out on assignment, you know, we're at the White Bluffs. You know, it's a long drive, it's a long boat ride, and we want to make sure everyone has time to do what they need, whether it's to film or sketch or interview or photograph, because we know that we're only going to be like one chance to do this and we can't go back. And, you know, our days are long and they're rewarding. But one thing that I always really look forward to is we'll brainstorm like the broader concepts for the story and themes, and that helps inform me about what photographs to think about and guides how I approach the still images. So a big job of ours is to be prepared, but be also open for possibility. You know, on our trips, we have like a long list of things to bring. You know, it's clothes for warm weather and cold weather and multiple types of footwear. And Lynda brings the most incredible coffee, which is so helpful in very rural areas, and incredible snacks. You know, I bring a fair amount of camera gear. You know, I know that the Columbia River is the main character, so I'm thinking about telephoto lenses and wide-angle lenses. I'll bring a GoPro, a fish tank to put my mirrorless camera in to get images of the hatchery fish, and I packed a drone. Last year, I became a drone pilot and got my certification. And during most of our trips, we flew with our drones, and this is near vantage on our way to Grand Coulee Dam. So we knew that a drone would be really helpful to show the scale and the grandness of the Columbia and its tributaries. You know, you can see, like, we talked to a biologist, Mike Hare, and, you know, we listened to our sources and biologists and community members, and they'll help inform us, like, what's important to show. And he showed us how the river channel's been altered here. It's being sandwiched by 2 dams and now empties into slack water. With photography, my goal is not to just make images of the places that we visit or the people that we meet, but it really gets at why readers should care. When visiting the Nez Perce Nation and with the Oatman family, I really wanted what was important to them to be conveyed in the images. This is Nicole and Carly. They introduced us to the Heart of the Monster, which is part of their creation story. This prominent landmark is just a couple miles from their home. They spend a lot of time there. They often fish at the Clearwater River, which is just down over here, over there. As Lynda said, they're a longtime fishing family. They talked about their commitment to the salmon, the challenges of less fish coming back. And so I'm thinking about in images, I want to show some of the care that Wes puts into his fishing and hunting. He's providing for his family and for his community. I'm trying to show his connection to home. We started the day at Wes's family store. It's named after the heart of the monster. Later, we went to their home. We talked about their family's long history in the Columbia River. And as Lynda said, we really try to spend time with community members and, walk in their everyday lives and their routines with them. And so, as Lynda said, we asked, if we weren't here, what would you be doing today? And they'd be out hunting. We went up high above the ridge lines. And it was wonderful. It's always a gift when community members are open to sharing their lives and their homes with us. I think that's a really scary thing to do now. And I really appreciate their trust and their openness. In the photographs, I'm hoping to share the warmth of their family, their connection. I'm trying to show their deep connection to their ancestral homeland. And as a photographer, it's important for me to remember there is a really wide range of emotions and questions and concerns that can come up when being photographed or participating in a journalistic story. When I was little, I was photographed, I think at the age of 10, for a book called 8,000 Miles of Dirt. It's a story about Wyoming's back roads. And I got photographed with myself and some friends fishing at a lake. And I remember being very nervous and also very excited. And I try to take that memory with me every time I meet somebody new. And I try to keep a really open communication process when photographing, and then also when being part of a journalistic story and keeping in touch and walking folks through the process. As a photographer, I generally gravitate towards people, and then place, and then things. And when we were going to photograph the Grand Coulee Dam, I knew it was going to be a little bit more challenging for me. We wanted to create a chapter that got to ideas of industrialization and of change. I was hoping that time of day could help with this. So most days on these trips, I would get up before dawn, and I'd try to catch that time of twilight or sunrise. Even though I don't really like early mornings, I dislike regret a lot more. And it's so true. It will sit with me in my stomach, and it'll haunt me that I didn't explore something. So it's important for me to stay up late, to get up early, to try to come up with all the visual opportunities that could be storytelling. So with these pre-sunrise images of Grand Coulee, like Lynda talked about earlier, we were trying to juxtapose them with some of the more soft and organic images of the Columbia, with something that was more cool. It showed the concrete, the steel, the wire. During the tour of the dam, it's massive and cavernous and overwhelming. So I tried to focus on details, the fluorescent lights, the 1940s, craftsmanship, the textures, the patterns, the sizzle of the electricity. I try to pay attention to that little thing in my head that's oh, that's interesting, or huh, because sometimes that's a photograph, and sometimes that's something that can bring a viewer into a scene. So when our team was working on this project and we were thinking about multiple chapters, we got a call from the Oatmans, and they invited us to go fishing for Chinook just above Bonneville Dam. They were practicing their treaty-protected fishing rights, and it's such a special honor to be asked to go with them. These sites are closed to the public. We had to get special permission from the Nez Perce tribe. And we really appreciate that they invited us during such an incredibly busy time. As a photographer, it's really easy for me to focus on the action in front of me, you know, the casting of nets, the cleaning of fish, the boating. And I definitely did do that. I take a lot of images, but I also try to take a step back and try to share like impressions that I'm thinking about or seeing. You know, I'm seeing that Wes is expertly navigating the river. I'm seeing like the number of the catch, the texture of the fishing nets, the architecture of the platforms. You know, it's super special to be with families, to fish where they've always done so. There's so much joy. Also, keeping in mind, I'm thinking about the character, the river being the main character. You know, I was thinking in the back of my head, this is a new part of the Columbia that we haven't explored yet. So I'm hoping to share the sense of place of the lower Columbia River, that it's more lush. The light hits differently. It's a different time of year. In this project, myself and my photo editor, we edited images into diptychs and into quads. Often we're trying to get everything into one image in photojournalism. But for this project, we were trying to step in and out to try to bring the reader in and out of scenes. In this image pairing, we were thinking about, you know, some of the warmness of the salmon contrasting with some of the coolness at twilight when loading up the boat. And in the last image of the project, this is a special moment. This is Jeannie. She's 86. She joined Wes and her family for the first time in a boat on the Columbia River. We liked this image because it showed connection. It was forward-looking. The family talked a lot about their dedication and stewardship for the Columbia. So, you know, we couldn't do stories like this without community members like the Oatmans. So I really wanted to give them a special thanks tonight. And also stepping back, I wanted to say we really appreciate everyone coming tonight, your viewership of the project, and your support for local journalism. So thank you so much.
Okay, so the first question I have is a provocative one. Lynda, I'm going to ask the first part and then pause because I want to focus us so that we don't take up all the time answering, is a river alive? With that, what is of the Columbia's legal status itself, not as a resource, but as a person?
So the question was, is a river alive, and what is the Columbia River's legal status as a person? We have seen many rivers around the world at this time given legal status as of person. In fact, the Penobscot tribe in 2016 made the Penobscot River a citizen of their nation with all of the rights thereto appertaining. So this rights of nature movement is burgeoning. The Columbia River has not been claimed as a citizen yet by any of the tribal nations. It has not been, no one has gone to court to bring about its personhood designation that way. I will tell you, however, that in working with the tribes of the Columbia Basin, they call the river their relative. So it is a living being, it is a family member, and it is a relative to them, even if they have not undertaken a legal or formal governmental process to state that. I think it's fascinating to think about how rivers have been regarded by us, we newcomers, just in the time since Grand Coulee was built, basically as a utility, as a commodity, something to make kilowatts, something to move other things on, a thing. And today, our understanding of the river is much richer. It's far more dimensional. Our appreciation for the costs that have come with turning it into an organic machine is sharp, it is acute. And while the river may not have legal status as a person, the Endangered Species Act requires that all of the non-human beings that rely on that river, the fish, that we're not allowed to make them go extinct because of making kilowatts. That's the law, and it's still the law. So it's a changing time on the Columbia, and it's a changing time for all of us. It's why we wanted to do this story and get into the incredible dynamism of this river, going back over its ancient and long, long history all the way to the present. I think each and every one of us would say that that river, it infected us and our imaginations. I mean, we became quite overtaken with its power, with the wonder of it, and being able to spend so much time with the people who worked with it in their different ways, whether they operated the Grand Coulee Dam or they fished it. These were people who had an intimate and important relationship with that river. So is a river alive? Absolutely. Is it a person? I think in many ways, there's no question that we're going to see a lot more of these designations of personhood for rivers. But I can tell you, for the tribes that live with the river today, it is already a family member. They call it their relative.
Our next question, I think this would be good for Lauren and Erika to take the lead on. How do you assure truth and respect when interviewing vulnerable people? And when an interview subject says, maybe post-publication, that they were not portrayed in a way that they wanted, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah,
That's a really tough question.
that is a tough question.
Also, I feel like, especially with working with Lynda, it's not necessarily one we've encountered often. And I think a lot of that goes toward what Lynda talked about when it comes to relationships and kind of following community protocol. I know a lot of times when we enter community, like Native communities, we go and speak with the elders first. That is like proper protocol to sort of hear from them, hear their perspective, let it inform our reporting before we move on and start talking to more and more people. I think that helps mitigate some of that. And, usually we will inform people of, the quotes used. We don't share our stories with sources before they're published, but we will share, what we have them saying in the story. That always helps because it becomes a discussion in advance. I don't know if you have more to add.
I think we try to walk community members through the process of the story too. Like, what does participation look like? We keep in touch throughout the process. From the very beginning, we'll have pre-interviews. We'll talk about the ideas, sometimes of the stories beforehand, and inform like, hey, this is what we're thinking about, and get feedback. Then through during the interview portions, we have a large conversation. When we start through the editing process, we fact check everything. So if something feels out of context or there's a blind spot, I think that fact checking process is really important. And, I think there's a lot of communication throughout the whole way.
Yeah, and especially in the moment, I think, I think about the photo that Lynda showed of the grave site. At that point, you probably were talking to him in real time if it was okay to be there, to photograph, making sure he was comfortable with that.
And even afterwards in the fact-checking process, we even double-checked to make sure, hey, with these sacred sites, are those okay to be photographed? We're thinking about that with maps. We're through this entire process, we're just double-checking things as we go.
I just want to note the look of shock and horror on both of my colleagues' faces at the thought that would happen, because honestly, we work so hard that should never happen. I would say it's at the core of everything we do, that relationship, that respect, that care. And so I was delighted to see that shock and horror.
Well done, well done. Lynda, I have a couple of questions here. that lean into sort of the news around the Columbia right now with the Trump administration, energy, the lower Snake River dams, and questions around removal. Could you talk a little bit about what you think are the biggest storylines there? And then what can you tell us about the lower Snake River dams?
I knew this would come up. It always does. I have a really long history with the Snake River and the Columbia River. I've been covering both since 1992. So, I think that what we see right now is a big step backward. When this administration came to town, they very deliberately, I don't even know how much time they spent with looking at the policies that had been put in place. A great effort by the Biden administration to try to advance this question of the lower Snake River dams, replacing services from them so that you could eventually take them out. That all got pitched out 100% out the window. And that's a problem because the Nez Perce tribe stayed their litigation on the basis of going forward with replacing the transportation services, having a role in alternative energy development to replace the electricity for the dams. And so to just chuck all that and send it all back to zero, it's not that it was a surprise. I think everyone anticipated that would happen, but that just sends it all backward. And so that's where we are, is backward. This is a reset moment. Anybody want to talk about Canada? So the Columbia River Treaty was pretty well on its way to being completed when Trump began saying things like he was going to annex Canada and et cetera, and has cratered that relationship, and then the tariffs and all the rest of it. And so the Columbia River Treaty is also now pretty much on hold. I think, honestly, on the Canadian side, they're just waiting for a new administration, and there are enough stopgap arrangements in place that your water is not going to get turned off. But backward, think backward. Everything has gone backward. And the thing about that is the fish really can't wait. There are runs of salmon, particularly in the Stake Basin now, down to 50 fish, 50. And those treaty rights are real. And they're just as real for us as they are for the tribe. And so I think this is a fraught time for the river. The demands on it are more intense than they've ever been. And if you talk to power planners, if you talk to biologists, if you talk to tribal cultural people and elders, this is a time of great concern and worry. It's a time to be informed. So thank you for reading the paper, and know that we will continue to cover this story.
I have a follow-up question to the energy issues. There's questions here about if we are to lose some of our hydropower, or we see continued declines in hydropower production because of drought and other issues related to climate change. What's the hope of keeping more clean energy on the grid? We did visit the Nez Perce, who were making some strides in this fashion. Could you talk a little bit about our clean energy outlook?
So again, the word is backward. What is so frustrating about this is there was an enormous amount of momentum for development of alternative potential energy sources in the Northwest. This is a new day. I mean, when these dams were built, none of these possibilities existed. We have more possibilities for energy generation today than we have ever had, and more on the way. But all that funding just got cut. All of those programs just got derailed. It's become unallowed speech to talk about climate. And so there's a tremendous sense of frustration amid tribes, nonprofits, government agencies at watching all of this work that in many ways was beginning to reach quite a crescendo here in the Northwest, because as usually we really were out ahead of anywhere else in the country on this. And now we've gone backward. We've cut the funding. We've terminated the programs. Nothing's happening. And a lot of things were supposed to be happening and were happening. It's not over, but it's backwards right now.
To change the subject just a bit, I think I have a question for Fiona here. This writer says that a publication not to be named says their writers seldom travel with their photographers. And I think this applies to Fiona's role as well. I was wondering if you could talk, Fiona, about how you rely on these collaborative trips with our reporting teams to bring your work to life, and what it means for you to have that in-person time out in the field.
I would say being out in the field is a great way to get away from my desk for a bit and have a little fun, but also to gather the most original references, because I don't want to, like, for example, when I'm drawing a glacier, I don't want to just look at diagrams that other people have drawn. I want to create something completely original, and I want to make sure that I'm drawing it as accurately as possible and capture the atmosphere of the place that I'm visiting. So I think that answers the question. Do you have anything you want to add?
Great, thank you.
I would just want to add what a joy it is to watch Fiona work. One of the first things we did together was a story about the Oso landslide 10 years later. And okay, it was early spring, it was raining, it was cold, you're bushwhacking through Willow. You know it's going to be a rugged situation. And we hadn't worked together before, and she looked me in the eye and she said, "I'm tough when I need to be." And she was.
That's awesome. Lynda, we have a couple of questions here about the invasive species in the Columbia River system. I remember when we were game planning for this story, in between trips maybe, this was a several trip type of story, we talked about the walleye quite a bit. And in fact, I remember there was a whole section in one of an early drafts of the story where we went kind of in depth about walleye. What is going on with walleye? And could you expand a little bit about some of these invasive species and who might rely on them?
So I want to take a step back and reveal a little bit more about the reporting process in every story, but certainly in this one. As I said earlier, you think you're doing one thing, and then because you learn something new, that being the whole idea of reporting, you suddenly discover you're doing something else. So I'm just looking for a boat. I had a grant from Stanford to help support some of this reporting. And so we decided we were going to go float the Hanford Reach of the Columbia River. So I needed to come up with a good, safe boat and a knowledgeable guide so the team could go out and float the reach. So I'm calling around and I find this nice guy, and I'm talking to this gentleman in Tri-Cities, and he's like, "Oh, I got a walleye trip that day. That day I'm out on walleye. Oh, I got these people coming in from North Dakota for walleye." I'm like, "Walleye? What's with the walleye?" And he explains that walleye is the hot action now on the Columbia River, that the salmon fishery has become so unreliable. They still do it, of course, but for someone trying to support a family and make real money, you want those sports people coming from Ohio, North Dakota, South Dakota, Michigan to come get walleye bigger than anything they've ever seen in their lakes. And I thought to myself, oh, that's the story. The Columbia is now no longer a salmon river, it's a walleye river, it's a bass river, it's a shad river, it's a pond fish river because of hundreds and thousands of miles of warm, slack water. And at that moment, as a writer, I felt the pivot go like that. So you think you're doing one thing, and then you learn something, and you're doing something else. So walleye, I came to learn, stood for everything about that river, how profoundly it's been changed, how those walleye are now all the way up the basin into the Snake, vectored through the fish ladders. Same thing with the shad. And I thought, that's the story. This utter human transformation of this wild, cold, fast salmon and steelhead river to a perfect place for pond fish, walleye.
Okay, so my bosses are here, so I have to plug the Sunday paper. We have a really fantastic report coming from the team about what we call our melting mountains. This is going to be a look at how the habitats, the ecologies of the mountains in Washington state are changing as snowpack is in decline, meadows are shrinking, and the tree line is shifting further in elevation. There are a few questions in here about our process, and it made me think about Fiona's work on this upcoming project. She has some incredible illustrations that are being finalized this week that you can see on Sunday, including a graphic that explains like how a glacier works and how it's changing. Fiona, you go to great lengths to fact check, to make sure that what we're putting out in the paper is better than what goes in a textbook, I think. Could you talk about how you work through that process, not just in the gathering of information, but then in the fact checking and the kind of quality control side of things?
Yeah, I like to do a lot of research, probably too much, but it helped me determine what to include, what not to include in illustration. And I also like to make sure to talk to an expert on the subject, a scientist. In this case, I reached out to Claire Todd, who used to work at Pacific Lutheran University and is now in California. And she had some wonderful videos online talking about glaciers on Rainier specifically. And it was like a virtual field trip. So I thought to convey that through my visual. And I know that the reporter also reached out to Maury Palto. I believe he's another expert in glaciers. And I'm really excited to bring that to you this Sunday. Can't wait.
All right, and we have just time for one more question, and this one is going to go to Lynda. Sorry, team members, but it is kind of her night. So this question is a good one. It is, what is the one most moving, amazing moment, good or bad, during your time at the paper? It can't be about me.
I think I can actually answer that question. Does everyone here remember Mother Orca Tahlequah? All right. So this is, for those of you who maybe just moved here or something, because almost everyone's heard of Mother Orca Tahlequah. This was the poor Mother Orca who carried her baby for 17 days and, more than 1,000 miles through the Salish Sea because she just didn't want to let that animal go. And we decided at the paper to make this a moment of witness for Seattle Times readers, that we would follow her basically everywhere that she went. And so it came the time to try to make that happen. This is not easy. This is a wild, free-swimming animal. You have to have special permits from the federal government to be on their boat and close enough to take pictures. The whales have to be there. The weather has to be right. And, this is a moment that's happening now. And so Steve Ringman, the photographer I was working with on this story, and I get ourselves out to the San Juan Islands, and days go by. We're trying to get on a boat that is going to be with her. And we finally go out actually with Soundwatch, which is a small nonprofit that tries to make sure that the boats out there, the fishing boats and so forth, the Joe Six-Packs are not getting too close to the whales, and they agreed to take us out. And so we spent most of the day just trying to find her. This is not easy. And then we're running out of light. It is finally about 7:30 at night. We're in Mosquito Pass in about 500 feet of water, and there she is. There's no one else around. It's just us and her. And I can see how she's arching her back extra hard because she's carrying this 350-pound, 7-foot-long calf. I can hear her breathing hard. I can see how every time she goes down, she has to go get that baby again so it won't drift away. And I just remember the feeling of being with her and how important it was to get that photo that became the iconic photo for that story. And also to witness her personally, to hear her breathe, and to watch her effort so that I could share what she was going through personally with all of you. So I will never forget that, and it stands out amid so many other moments of witness, because this is a job of witness.